All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. We have a special show this evening, a special report touching on a very interesting topic, as you may have seen from the broadcast. We're going to go around robin, but I definitely want to welcome our panelists that we have today. We have Jen, Lorna, Kenneth, and Laura with us. So I'll start from top left to right and let everyone kind of go around and introduce themselves. Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen Baumgartner Barnes. I'm a um, master's level social worker with an LICSW in Minnesota. I also practice in Colorado remotely. Um, I've been in the field going on almost 21 years now and have some connection to the military. My most recent partner and I were together 10 years, with him being in the Air Force as a C-130 loadmaster. My dad served Vietnam era, and my grandpa fought in the South Pacific during World War II. So I'm excited always to be back with you all.
Awesome, thank you. Lorna?
My name is Lorna Rose. I have a Bachelor of Social Work and a Juris Doctor degree. I am an Operations Assistant Manager at VA Claims Insider, so I'm very happy to spend every day serving our veterans. And I am the proud granddaughter of a World War II veteran who was stationed in Italy.
Awesome. Laura?
I'm Laura Page. I'm a veteran coach or the veteran coach on YouTube with VA Claims Insider. I was a 10-year Army veteran. I did my first 6 years as a combat medic, my last 4 as a healthcare administration officer, had my bachelor's degree in radiologic sciences. So using my military medical background to serve veterans right now seeking benefits for disability.
Awesome. Kenneth?
I'm Kenneth Reese. I'm a ex UH-60 helicopter crew chief. Have my bachelor's in aeronautics and my master's in aviation maintenance. Um, Served 8.5 years, and I'm here now.
Awesome. Thank y'all for being here. Usually when we start these, we like to at least recognize, obviously, as you see, my name, David DP Pineda, veteran master coach with Team Champion over at VA Claims Insider. And as you see, we're having a collaboration of some industry professionals. Obviously, we have legal, we have mental health, we have veteran coaches. And one of the things we obviously always want to do is recognize those that are joining us. So you saw the trigger warning before we start anything. This is one of those sessions where it might not be the time to watch it live. We're going to be talking about military sexual trauma, military sexual assault, what the ramifications of the court decision is from a legal standpoint, as well as the mental health impact. Because of that, to respect a veteran who may not be ready to have that conversation yet or listen to these things, I would say that you have the permission to come back and watch this later. Wherever you see this, this will be available to watch again on YouTube and Facebook. But we want you definitely to walk away with some tangible, actionable points and make the best of the information that we have here for you. We have a few individuals and veterans that are watching, so we want to say hello to everyone who is out there. Jesus Velasquez says hello and greetings to everyone. So if you let us know what branch of service you served, the years of service that you served. So we appreciate it and we can congratulate you and thank you for your service for sure. We have Hiram, one of our veteran coaches, as well, saying hello. We have Brian Lofton, one of our coaches, as well, saying hello to everyone and appreciating the service. Heath, watching from YouTube, says Army 1990 to 1993. And there'll also be in the comment section that we'll bring up from time to time various information. So we'll be giving out where to reach out for support and help as you may need it. So definitely feel free to comment your years of service, the branch that you were in, so we can go ahead and say hello and kind of bring your name up and share a little moment with you. Matt, thank you for your service, Army 2001 to 2009. Tamika says hello. Hey, Tamika, how are you? We appreciate you joining us today. Jesus, 83 to 90, U.S. Army. Let's see here. Tamika told us her time of service as well, 98 to 2006 Army. Thank you for your service. We have veteran coach Amy Lacey saying 2000 to 2011 U.S. Air Force. And as they come through, you'll see me pop them up from time to time here. One of our moderators, Lisa, as well, is in the comment section. She's saying hello from Colorado Springs. Desiree, appreciate you for joining us. U.S. Army 2000 to 2003. One point that I will say is definitely feel free to ask a question, but because of the nature of what we're going to talk about, feel free to ask your question, but please know that I will not bring up your name if it's something personal relating to the matter. So, for example, if you're going to say the service that you were in or something like that, I'll go ahead and pop up that comment. But if it's a question relating to the matter, I'll keep, obviously, your anonymity there. But I'll read the question. So please feel free to ask a question, but know that I won't bring up your name and just read it anonymously. One comment that did come up because of what I just said, I'm sorry, but I will watch it later. It might set me off more. And that's why. So definitely, please take a minute and come back to this when you're ready. But know that we're coming from a place of having the right personnel in place to support you all. So with that being said and done, let's start to move forward. We'll do a little rapid fire here. Michelle is jumping in, U.S. Air Force 91 to 98. Brian Lofton said he couldn't stay behind, Army 90 to 1993. Horace says Army's coming to house 82 to 86. And we have a slew of others. We have Mr. David Davis in the house, active Air Force 97 to 05, present reserves 08 to present. We have the man, the myth, and the legend, Terrell Morrell, 98 to 2012, U.S. Navy. We have as well one of our veteran coaches and medical professionals, Maria Hussein as well, here today to talk. So feel free in the comment sections to talk amongst yourselves. We won't bring those up, but we wanted to at least recognize those that are here with us this evening. So with that being said and done, obviously, again, I would be remiss to not bring up the disclaimer we brought up in the beginning. If you find yourself in crisis, these things may set you off, or you're in a place where you need to reach out to someone. Please don't take this as lip service. Please reach out. There is nothing wrong with reaching out for help, and we'll talk about that. But again, 800-273-8255. You're a veteran, press 1, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net. We'll be showing this again throughout the evening, but we wanted to make sure that we give these tools to you all as we discuss the topic today. So with that being said and done, something big happened last week. Many individuals may not be aware of this, so part of the reason we're having this conversation and the manner we're having it is we have Jen, who is a mental health professional. We have Lorna, who's bringing a legal perspective, and Kenneth and Laura are not only veteran coaches, but they also are MST survivors themselves. So that's going to kind of moderate the questions of how we'll go forward. With that being said and done, there's something that happened. So I'm going to go right to Lorna here and just ask the question. Statute of limitation went away. This decision that happened last week went back and changed things fundamentally. I don't have a law degree. The background might look fancy, but the reality is that what does that mean? Can you break down what is statute of limitation before we even get into what actually happened? Because some individuals may just figure, I may have been a victim, I may have experienced an assault, something may have happened in service, and it's just too far gone. That's what I understand that to be. It's out of the time frame of being able to seek legal justice or something. Can you unpack a little bit about what the legal aspect of what happened last week and why it's groundbreaking?
Yes. So the statute of limitations is pretty close to what you just described. It's essentially a deadline. In this case, there was for a period of time, it was a 20-year period of time between 1986 and 2006, there was imposed what would have been a 5-year statute of limitations on military sexual trauma incidents that occurred. So that means if you did not bring your claim or your case against the person who committed the act of MST against you within 5 years of the act happening, then you wouldn't be able to bring any kind of criminal case against them under military law. So what happened was that got overturned on December 10th, 2020. The Supreme Court of the United States overturned any period of statute of limitations on military sexual traumas that have occurred, including during that 20-year gray period.
And for those that may have not seen this on military.com, you'll find it. It's circulating. We'll link it as well. But it's interesting because, again, I don't know how these things work, so I will say that what stood out to me is in an 8-0 opinion, it pretty much unanimously, it was a overturning of this. So it's not so much that it was like a conversation back and forth. I don't know if that's something that happens very often, but one of the points that I wanted to definitely bring up, which was interesting from the military perspective, was how they sided.
Yes.
Alito said that, among other things, the government argues that acts committed by a service member may cause special damages and critically undermine unit cohesion and discipline, that in some circumstances, the crime may have serious international implications that also appear to have been the view of Congress and the executive as well. The justices agreed that with the government in that these acts in particular are damaging to damaging crime in the military context that disrupts good order and discipline. Right? Common sense prevails that in a military environment, it's a different world, right? It's not trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. But in a military environment, it's not like you just go to work and leave and it's over, right? It's literally these individuals that may be over you, the person that may have assaulted you or done something to that nature, is your boss. It's someone that's pretty much has power over your ability to provide for your family or move forward, unlike other places. So it's a very unique place, especially when you look at a combat environment or being ready to deploy. So I think it's really pertinent the fact that it does disrupt good order and discipline. Obviously, we understand that, but sadly, from a legal standpoint, there was a statute of limitation that obviously was in place. So many individuals kind of packed that away. Lorna, what would you say to that? Because I want to also then bring in Jen and talk about what that really means. But so for someone now who may have put that away or may have tried to seek legal remedy or bring justice forward, they could not, correct? Because of maybe it was within that period.
Right. So if prior to this decision last week, if you were a victim of military sexual trauma during that period where the statute of limitations would have applied, you couldn't bring those claims outside of that 5-year deadline. And when you mentioned that this was a unanimous decision and there wasn't a lot of back and forth, that's a really important point to bring up. This is a very conservative court because Amy Coney Barrett did not participate in this decision. It was an even number of justices. It could have been split. And this is a court that contains Brett Kavanaugh, who is one of the most infamous figureheads of the Me Too movement. So this is a very monumental decision for the Supreme Court to rule on this, especially, again, with a conservative panel. They're more hands-off when it comes to the government. And they decided that they had the jurisdiction to rule on something that was only applicable to military law. So now it is an opportunity for anybody who was victimized while serving in the military during that period of time, or any period of time really, that they can pursue a criminal case against the perpetrator in military court.
Interesting. So there's obviously a few things to be able to unpack there, but I think that the biggest thing is it's groundbreaking beyond the fact that it's a military or veteran case in any case, period. So it's huge to begin with. But I think before, and some comments have come through where individuals have said they have to step away and come back, because obviously for many individuals, I think there's an aspect here of they may have sought to try to bring justice or get to a place where they could have said something. And the reality is that maybe that was outside of that window, which again, now it's an administrative legal rule that was in place, but it doesn't take away the damage that was done to someone's trajectory in life. So for many, they may have got treatment and moved forward with their life. Others may have put that trauma and packed it away. So the reality is that now, because of this, there's a mental health aspect, right? So from a legal perspective, what you're saying, it makes sense, right? I get it. But
yes,
there are individuals that may have had events over 20 years ago, 10 years ago, right, where this is something now that's behind them. Jen, from a mental health perspective, before I can even go talk to Lorna or talk to a lawyer, see what are my options, I may be in a place, someone may be in a place where that's behind me. I've moved on from that. That's not something I feel to go back. What is some things that individuals should look at from the mental health side, because this can potentially open, Pandora's box for individuals, or things that may have been suppressed or put away.
Yeah, yeah, DP, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of times, survivors have moved on, especially when they realize their case can't be heard, or maybe it was heard and was dismissed because of the statute of limitations. And so this news can be quite triggering. My initial response was, yay, this is great. And then as a therapist, I was like, wait a minute, this could really be hard for people, especially if they just don't want to go there. And so I think the first thing that people need to consider is like, is this even something I want to do? Because you don't have to. Lorna and I were talking in a different conversation about, this is not a survivor's personal call to action to like bring this to the civil or to the criminal circuit, right? So I think the important thing is that individuals really reflect on this. I would recommend getting with whatever kind of mental health professional that you have a relationship with, or finding one if you don't yet, or even like a trusted coach, to see if this is something that you're really ready to deal with.
And Jen, and that brings a good point up that I just wanted to interject here, which is the nature of this conversation is veterans having a conversation with veterans, and the ability to loop in a mental health professional and a legal professional, but by no means does this constitute medical advice nor legal advice. So you have to obviously make due diligence to seek medical, mental health opinion support from your therapist, or seek it, as well as from a legal standpoint. But the goal here is to begin the conversation, at least equip you with the questions. So, for example, from a mental health perspective, now some of the things that we may speak about, you can go to your mental health professional and ask certain questions, or go seek legal and have those questions answered there. But seldomly do we have individuals that have both access. So you may have someone, I would assume, and I would say that maybe they're in contact with someone on the legal side, right? I'm talking to Lorna. She's a person helping me, professionally in that aspect, but I'm not tackling the mental health side. And that's something that's limiting my ability to move forward. Or vice versa, I may be in mental health, I may be in therapy, but I don't even want to touch the legal aspect of it all because of preconceived notions or the way things happen, right? Like anything else in the military, we say you have barrack lawyers, right? They basically say, you know what, you're going to waste your time. It's not even worth it. Just go get a rating. So there's a few different things here at play. There's a mental health aspect, there's a legal aspect, and there is even a rating aspect from a disability standpoint where veterans are also able to seek a disability claim for these things. So there's a lot to unpack there. But again, all of this is meant to be information to begin the conversation, but respecting where you are in your journey and giving you the tools to at least begin correctly. Because Lorna, I would ask you, if someone fails to seek legal advice and counsel, oftentimes you will regret it afterward if you don't make the right steps in life as a whole. Most people say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with legal. And then something really bad happens. It's like, man, I should have definitely consulted legal. And ultimately, I think having the conversation of reaching out for legal counsel, it's not like what the movies make it out to be. Can a regular person, what can they expect, Lorna, from that perspective, right? Like, let's say someone has never even looked at legal, but if I reach out, do I have to completely bring every piece of evidence? Like, is there an introductory call? How does that even work? Because all I've seen is maybe some movie of what a lawyer does, but what's the reality of when I walk into, let's say, a law office or reach out?
Well, the reality is certainly not what you see on TV. I think it's very important for people to understand that there is seldom a team of legal professionals a la SVU that are ready to throw on their capes and be the superhero champions for the victims. That just simply isn't the case. The criminal justice system is based on law, order, enforcing those two things, and then doling out punishments. And there's absolutely always going to be an introductory call or a consultation with any attorney that's worth their salt. And I recommend at least getting a consultation with an attorney, because they will give you a much better idea than perhaps a friend could, or even a fellow survivor could, of what you're going to be looking at, because every survivor's situation is different. There are very minute details of one person's case that could differ from the next person's case that will lead to a totally different outcome. So having that consultation is extremely important. And of course, being mentally prepared to have that conversation with presumably a complete stranger is where that mental health piece comes in, and making sure that you're prepared to do that.
And I thank you for that, Lorna, because I think it's definitely pertinent to share that. Because if you've never had that conversation, right, based off what you see in the movies, who knows what's going to happen. But you said a good point there, which has me ask the same question. Jen, someone out there right now may have never reached out. Can't tell the difference between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, LICS. What is all those letters? The point is, I don't need a shrink. I don't need that. I am fine. I've just moved on. I'm good. Look at me now, right? But yet the reality is that for many of us, right, rated for PTSD, my fellow VCs here as well, who are also rated for mental health conditions, will tell you that when it's all said and done, we all came to a point where we had to realize that what we were saying was not what we were living. But what Lorna said, to be able to have that conversation with a stranger and seek again, or find the will or strength or reason to find or seek legal remedy, there's a mental health aspect that has to happen. I can't even walk into legal until I can get ready to have a conversation, because I may think I'm good, but that suppressed trauma, does that have a statute of limitation, Jen? Does it matter if it happened in 85 or 75 or 95 or 2005?
Yeah, there's no statute of limitations on the impact of your mental health. I mean, if you've had treatment, if you've completely resolved your past trauma with treatment, with, something like EMDR or IFS or TCTSY, any of, different modalities, trauma-focused CBT, certainly you won't be as reactive emotionally. That's the whole intent of treatment. But if you've never had treatment and you're faced with even thinking about this kind of decision, sometimes just even that can be triggering, although not for everybody. Some people have a lot of inner resources to really tuck that away, but you don't know what is going to trigger it. So maybe they can listen to this conversation and be fine, but maybe when they're sitting in an attorney's office across from someone who, us therapists dress pretty casual and attorneys wear suits usually.
It became a little more real now all of a sudden.
It became real and intimidating. And so that could certainly be triggering. And I think Lorna makes a really good point. Real life isn't Law and Order SVU. You don't necessarily have people who are there to champion the survivors of sexual abuse. In fact, as a therapist, I often hear the opposite is true. And having worked with clients who've gone through the investigative process, just through police departments, while I would like to say it's the exception, I can't say that it's the exception that they are treated poorly, that their situation is minimized, especially in regards to sexual assault of any kind. And that's just the investigative process. And there's a lot of answering questions over and over and over about what happened, and being asked the same question a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different times. And that's not what we do in therapy. That's a very different process than what we do in therapy. What we do in therapy is focusing on giving you the tools that you need to heal. And when you're ready to do the recovery work, we aren't talking about what happened over and over. Mm-hmm. That's not required to heal from your trauma with different therapies like EMDR or IFS or TCTSY, what have you. So I think the important thing to really think about is, do you have the support system you need, including a therapist? Have you done enough treatment around it so that you could even start the conversation? I guess if someone is rated for PTSD, I would really, I can't tell people what to do. This isn't legal advice, but I would really consider if you can go into an attorney's office without having first talked to a therapist, just to even have backup support if it doesn't go well for you. because there's no guarantee that you're going to have an attorney like Lorna, who also is a social worker and who's going to be super compassionate and awesome, you know?
And
And
that's
so
a
I
good
think there's
point.
a lot of,
And that's a
yeah.
good point, Jen, as far as, and I'm going to bring in Laura here because there's a good point you made there where we may have veterans who are rated for a mental health condition and it might be labeled PTSD, but the reality is it stemmed from a military sexual trauma or military sexual assault. And the way that one may go about the disability process differs from the legal aspect. If you're looking at the criminal side of things, to what you said, right, having to really unpack some of that. So I would almost argue that from a claims perspective, some of that process is not as detailed because you're saying basically I have a disability and that today has caused me a mental health condition, right, that limits me both socially and occupationally. The minute I turn around and say now I'm taking a legal stance to seek remedy from a criminal perspective or what have you, that's going to take a different path there. And we'll kind of come back to that. But Laura, on your side, I want to ask you as a veteran who transitioned to becoming an officer, because I think there's a powerful story of why you did that, and I want you to talk a little bit about that. Can you speak to the person right now who might say, you know what, I get it, legal talk, mumbo jumbo, I get it, you know, mental health, all that stuff, but you guys just don't understand, right? I'm in a place where I'm good, I don't need to deal with that. Laura, from the survivor's point of view, because I want to make a point that many individuals that are hearing us now, wherever you may be, you may identify as a victim, but there's a journey to becoming a survivor. And at times that takes reaching out to the people to your left and your right, mental health professionals, getting the tools to regain the ability to move forward. A disability and impairment does not mean you're unable to do something. So I want to be able to empower you to the fact that you matter, I matter, Laura matters, as does Kenneth, and your truth is your truth. And the groundbreaking aspect of this decision is to give power back to someone that was a victim, but the story doesn't stop there. There's a journey to becoming a survivor, and that's where I think Kenneth, both from a male perspective and Laura from a female perspective, have a unique perspective. So, Laura, what's your take on all of this when you kind of heard this just as a person?
Just as a person, this is amazing news, because there's a lot of times where a statute of limitations, just from my perspective, you may not be ready in 5 years to talk about it. You may have suppressed that and kept that down for years. So you may not be ready in 5 years. I don't think with things of this gravity that there should be. So this is groundbreaking. It's exciting, especially for those who have failed to get justice, that have sought it and didn't have that opportunity. So I think that's huge. But from a veteran standpoint, like Jen said, there's a lot of backlash for people who seek, you know, justice or compensation or whatever have you, you know, legal, you know, even just getting seen for mental health is looked down upon from some people in the service. You know, you don't want to be seen as weak. You want to deploy. You want to go to schools. You want to move forward in your career and promote. So you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to be that person, that guy, that gal that told on somebody else's battle buddy. So there is a lot of baggage to unpack, and I think it's really good that we gave out that disclaimer, and I'm glad that we're still doing that, because this can be a trigger, especially if you have suppressed it. I think it's important to take your time to watch this, because it's hard for us to talk about it. And, you know, we get vulnerable with you guys as veteran coaches, and I think that that's impactful, and that's a passion of mine now, what I do, because there's a lot of people that have suppressed it and don't want to deal with it with mental health because of this stigma, or legally because maybe they don't know the person who assaulted them or harassed them. So I think having a claims perspective is a whole nother realm, because a lot of people don't know they can seek monetary compensation, disability benefits for that trauma that they've had to endure. So I think that's really important as veterans to even know that that option exists, because again, you may not be ready for treatment. You may not be ready for legal and criminal charges, but you may be ready to get compensation, to feel that, you know, some kind of justice is served in some sort of way, for you to deal with your your physical and emotional baggage from it.
And Laura, can you share one point that you shared with us, which was what took you from being enlisted to becoming an officer? Because you touched on something as how people are viewed who speak out against this. And right now, the reality is that you may be watching this as just someone's family member. Maybe it's your brother or your sister, or maybe your child who may have experienced something in service, and you may want to give them support but don't know how. So, to be able to explain for those that don't have a veteran background, what does that mean? Because part of your journey from being enlisted to becoming an officer kind of was because of that, as far as how people are viewed when they do speak up and break the kind of brotherhood of band of brothers. But the fact is, sometimes there's not rivalry. There's actually some issues and there's crimes and atrocities. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Absolutely, because seeing it and being a part of it, any person who's been a victim of assault or harassment feels in some way sometimes like they can't talk about it, that they don't want to be victim blamed. And that's even more so true with the military, because it is a brotherhood. It's a big fraternity. And if you're the one who tells on somebody, gets somebody in trouble, retaliation is a concern, because hazing is already a thing in the military. It is, retribution is a concern. And there's been recent events with Vanessa Guillen. I won't get into too much detail with that, but when things are reported, it's a concern. So it's hard to step forward and talk about that when you don't trust your leadership. So being, in that place, it made me want to be that advocate for somebody else and enforce or try to embrace that change in the culture from a leadership standpoint, because I didn't have a lot of female leadership when I was enlisted. And if I did, they probably went through the same kind of stuff that I was going through and felt like they didn't have a voice either. So I think having more empowered women in leadership was important, and it was a huge reason of why I commissioned.
So there's a power in that, right? Because I guess my question to you, Laura, is what did you tap into that gave you the strength to move from being a victim to a survivor, but then being an advocate and a support for others? Because that's leaps and bounds through the process and that journey. What would you say to someone that says, Laura, you're stronger than me? You know what? You got it together. But where I'm at right now, I just been through things, and I just can't do that. I can't even get to being a survivor, let alone helping someone else. What would you say to someone out there right now, Laura, who may be watching this? You may be watching this at wherever you are. You might be in a closet. You may be in your car. You may be alone. The fact of the matter is, you matter. But Laura, what would you say to that person who may be watching this now, saying, Laura, this sounds great and stuff, but it's been too long. It's been too far. What's the worth? What's the use? How can I even?
It's never too late. And that's what this whole Supreme Court, decision is about. It's not too late now. And I think, using your pain and your past experiences to help other people is empowering. And going through, harassment or assault, or anybody who's been a victim, there is a process to becoming a survivor. And everybody's process is different. But to me, what was the most important was acknowledging it and seeking help for that. If you've been harassed continuously, it brings you down, and you do, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but for me in my journey, seeking help, getting treatment for that was a huge part of that. Acknowledging it was a huge part, and then using that for a purpose. It gave it a different perspective, because people think, why did this happen? Why me? And you get in that victim mentality. But when you give that a purpose, you become a survivor, in my experience.
And thank you for sharing that, Laura, because I think that's powerful for someone that I can tell you that, again, today we're speaking about mental health at the heart of all of this. And the fact of the matter is that it's someone like Laura who has been in that dark place, right? whether you're dealing with depression or anxiety or unresolved trauma or things you've packed away. One analogy that one of my therapists shared with me is that pretty much it's like a fridge. You can lock that fridge with things in there that are rotting, but make no mistake about it. If something triggers or that begins to seep open a little bit, that's in there and it's compounding and it's going to smell and it's going to affect you. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter because if you leave something in the fridge for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, it's still in there and you're carrying that load. I've heard similar things to saying you're walking with a backpack, with a rucksack, and all that trauma's back there still weighing you down. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't take away from your strength or your reality, your truth, by getting help. So, to Laura's point, I think there's a power in understanding that for me, when I was in a dark place with my mental health, it was a battle buddy, right? It was someone that reached out and says, hey, accountability, checking on your strong friends. And I think we can relate to some of that, but I want to also go to Kenneth because there are men who are also affected by this. And it's so hard to even speak up and say these things. So, Kenneth, we've talked and had lives like this before, but again, I have to say in front of everyone, I commend you, Laura, and I commend you, Kenneth, for one, joining us, for speaking up, for being a voice for the voiceless, for being able to begin the process of breaking the stigma, to show that at the end of the day, there is hope and there is a way forward. Not the cliche patronizing, do it first. No, finding that reason, whatever it may be, but knowing that it is possible, right? Kenneth, one, thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave and speaking up. But from the male perspective, how did this all affect you? What are you thinking?
So when my incident happened, it took me from Billy, badass, I was a crew chief. I was working with 4-star generals, 3-star generals, 2-star generals on a daily basis, flying them from point A to point B, protecting my aircraft. And after my incident, it was, how did this happen to me? Just like Laura said, it brings you to that point to where you start looking at yourself as you're a victim, and I immediately took that and I was like, I gotta pack it away. I've got to pack it away. And, I can't show this, I can't let my comrades know what happened to me. I can't let, my wife know because my wife's going to, freak out. My family's going to freak out. And I hid it for 5-6 years. Didn't say a word about it. I kept it compacted down, and I watched myself go from, this heavy performer to just going down this sliding scale, because of the fact that I wasn't able to mentally and physically pull myself out of this rut. I was going downhill, and I was going downhill fast. And it all compacted to the point to where I was, doing a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing. I was prescription pain medication, Xanax. I was taking, anywhere from 6 to 8 milligrams of Xanax a day, just to make life, and literally I would be on the couch and my wife, would ask about what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be sitting there watching my phone. I completely pulled myself out of everything. And then it finally, what really was a turning point in my journey was the fact when I realized I was going to lose my family either way, right? Because in my mind, I was going to lose my wife, my child, if I told them. But then it got to the point, if I don't get help, I'm going to lose them anyways. So I need to step out. I need to bring this. I need to step into the light. And really, that's after only a little bit, of being out into the open about all this. I had my first live with you, DP, because of the fact that I was in the mastermind group, and I seen you post about the MSTs thing, and I was like, you know what? I need to step out. And I don't know if you remember, but when I first said I was going to step in, I was just writing a paper.
I remember that.
I wasn't going to go live. And then I said, you know what? I need to get out there. People need to see my face. Because of the fact this happens to both women and men alike. It's not a blind, subject. It happens to everybody.
And Kenneth, I would say, so for those, here at VA Claims Insider, we work with veterans, referencing the mastermind, our closed group. We're veterans helping veterans. Laura and Kenneth operating as a veteran coach, helping veterans go through this process, right? Helping them understand the disability side of the house. There are some questions that came up. We'll start transitioning to that. But I definitely wanted to just highlight that, this is a topic that we have to keep talking about. And when we put together the project of having an MST roundtable, we had Kenneth and we had another veteran whose event was in the 70s. And we had a psychologist with us. And we talked about that. And the reality is that when it's all said and done, trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. And whether it was yesterday, 5, 10, 20 years ago, the reality is that that's still there. And ignoring it when it comes to trauma doesn't necessarily heal that. Just because it's happened how many years ago, when you're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, by virtue of encountering something that puts you in a fight or flight situation, hence by definition, whether that be in combat, whether that be in a civilian aspect, whether that be stateside in an office where you were subject to military sexual assault. Trauma is trauma, and your brain goes into a place of survival, run, flight, or flight, and that switch kind of gets stuck, hence PTSD. I definitely don't want to take any word from Jen here on the mental health side of the house, but I mentioned that because it's powerful to understand that regardless of where you're at, this is no respecter of men or women. But there's a common denominator to Laura and Kenneth, who both have had the strength to speak up, which is the fact that I would argue that as a veteran, one thing we have is we have been to the worst places at times. And I've always said that in the worst places in life, we've made the best memories and friends and family members because that bond of where we're at with them. And I say that because regardless of what you may have been through, that community that you left, that feeling that Laura felt, that Kenneth felt when we left service, that brotherhood that's gone now, that adjustment disorder, that's something that we basically have tried to recreate here by being able to say, Laura, I'm dealing with something. Can you help me? You've been there. And you don't the veteran coach does not substitute here therapy or legal advice, but it's to begin aggregating these resources. Laura, Jen, I would ask you, for Kenneth and for Laura as veterans themselves who have gone through this process, some would say, how can someone who's been through this even try to help someone else, right? When it's all said and done, you've been through this stuff, and Laura, you've worked with other veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma, as has Kenneth. Jen, does that even make sense? Like, what's going on here?
Well, it absolutely does. And I have two things I can say about that. One is exactly what Laura said. One of the steps of the grief process, right? We have to grieve what happens to us, the traumatic things too. And one of the steps of the grief process is finding meaning and purpose. And I'm not talking about like, oh, everything happens for a reason. No, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about authentically saying this thing happened to me. And when we can find meaning and purpose in it, like, okay, what am I going to do now? That actually can be very empowering and very healing. And so saying that, what might not be surprising to know, for those of you familiar with the ACEs study, it's the Adverse Childhood Experience Scale. It basically is 10 questions about traumatic things that happened in your youth. There is one profession that has the highest ACEs scores. It's therapists. It's therapists. So oftentimes, in fact, these veteran coaches are doing exactly what what therapists do, is we have these experiences that are traumatic or difficult, and part of our own healing is empowering others to heal as well. And I think that can be a very, very powerful piece of it. Obviously with appropriate boundaries and everything.
But there's something that happens inside, Jen. I think because I could tell you that, you know, to kind of use a parallel example, Kenneth and I have spoken about this. Laura, I would ask if you agree with this, but when you hear of heroic acts, there's no one in the military who's ever done anything who will identify as a hero because basically you're doing your job, and arguably it's the man to my right and the woman to my left who I'm serving with. And the fact of the matter is, when we got off of this vehicle of transport, whether it be a ship, an helicopter, what have you, we walked out of here together and we're going back together. And we leave no one behind. And I would say that when you hear the stories of survivors who have done heroic events, when you hear about someone who ran forward while taking incoming fire to pull someone back, there's something there that's not, oh, this person wanted to do something to get a selfie. It's that requirement that says, I know that I'll jump in front of a bullet for Kenneth if he's one of my soldiers, that Laura, as one of my leaders, is going to be leading from the front. And that's something that we experience in just how we conduct our military business, which is back to the opinion of how that affects military good conduct and order, because that bond is what helps us win on the military aspect. But when we leave the military, I would argue that what Kenneth and what Laura do day in, day out, it's no different. If anything, it's happening on the mental health side because, yes, Laura, you've taken some shots. You have wounds, emotional wounds, traumatic wounds, as does Kenneth, from a military sexual trauma nature and other things. But the fact of the matter is, despite that, you run into incoming fire because there's someone out there right now listening who needs some help. And you push forward to that. And I think that in part may be also part of Laura's journey when she talked about going from being a victim to a survivor to an advocate. Not because she's woman, hear her roar. Well, yes, she's roaring and she is woman. But I think beyond that, though, would you agree, Laura, that it comes down to that bond of not leaving someone behind? And the fact that you've been through this trauma, but reaching forward not only is therapeutic to a degree by helping, but it's part of that as well. What do you think about that, Jen and Laura?
Go ahead, Laura.
So I definitely think that it gives me a unique insight to what I do as a veteran coach, because I know, as a client of the program previously, I went through the program and I had a male coach, and it was nothing against him. It's not something I talked to him about. I talked to him about, my migraines and my back and this and that, but it's not something that I felt comfortable talking about, harassment or assault with him at that time, So I feel that I, again, have that unique perspective and insight, especially being, a woman and Kenneth being a male who have been through similar experiences in the service. I think that it does give me purpose, and it does give me, not the corny, everything happens for a reason thing, but it does give things a purpose, and you go through and you grow through what you go through. So that's how I've looked at it.
Jen, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's one of the most courageous things people do is y'all do a lot of courageous things in the military as a civilian. Even if I have family members and loved ones who are in the military, I think y'all do a lot of really, really courageous things from where I stand, even though I know you look at it as just part of your deal that you make with each other. But I would say, choosing to heal from this and help others is really courageous. But I also think, like Laura said, there's a beauty in being able to offer to someone maybe what you didn't even feel you had yourself.
And I think, and I want to go to Lorna, because I'd be remiss to not bring up something, because you've heard me say it throughout the evening, but the fact is that trauma is trauma is trauma. It doesn't respect whether you are a man or a woman. And it honestly also doesn't respect whether or not you served or did not serve. Lorna, there's a few little letters there on your title, which are interesting. But I also want to say that these fundamental truths, just from the point of as a human being, experiencing trauma, coming to a place of getting the tools to move forward. And however your journey goes, whether you pay it forward, you do what Laura does, what Kenneth does, or go forward from having an undergrad in social work to going into law, can you share a little bit, Lorna, from your side? Because this journey also affects many individuals who are civilians. And I mention this only because in the military, we serve with civilians. We are at times in units with contractors and civilians who, at the end of the day, are also at times, sadly, victims who may have experienced trauma. So, this is something that when you look at how we operate as a service, this also affects civilians there as well. And there's also a truth and a journey. Whether or not, let's say, you're not a veteran, you're a human being. Can you talk a little bit, Lauren, about how did we go from BSW to JD, and a little bit about kind of your points, which I think are great to be able to add a context for those that are the same, but I'm not a veteran. I was around, but this doesn't apply to me.
Sure. So I have the gaining of the alphabet after my name has a pretty unique story. So I decided when I was 11 years old that I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to represent children. I wanted to help children who were in similar situations to mine or even worse than mine. Growing up, I did not have an ideal family life. So as I grew older and as I underwent more experiences, I expanded that wanting to help people legally to wanting to help fellow victims of sexual assault and domestic violence like myself. And so that was why I decided that I would get a bachelor's in social work. I thought it would give me a strong foundation for working with that population because I knew that attorneys didn't have a very good reputation coming from a family of a lot of attorneys. Italian attorneys, Italian New York attorneys. So that's my lineage. So I wanted to get that really good foundation for helping people, but be able to have more power where it matters, which to me was the courtroom, was in the legal realm, where a lot of people do feel mostly powerless and voiceless. And Lord knows I am not voiceless. And if what I am supposed to do is take what I've been through and use that as motivation to amplify my voice on behalf of others, that's what I'm here to do.
And Lorna, you did some work even in a quite prestigious organization, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so I am a former title holder in the Miss America organization. I am Miss Finger Lakes 2009. The Finger Lakes is the central region, the wine country of upstate New York, so I'm quite proud to have reigned over it. And when I was competing and an active title holder in Miss America, my social justice platform was fighting back against domestic violence and sexual assault. And nothing made me feel better about what I did than going and putting on that sparkly crown and talking about my experience and hearing how much it empowered the people listening to me to speak up for themselves, whether that meant finally speaking to a teacher about what happened to them at school, or finally opening up to their parents, or finally wanting to pursue, legal remedies against a perpetrator as an adult. So that is why I joke, I will never shut up about this, because the more we talk about it, the more those of us that have the experience talk about it, the more we create that sense of community for those listening. And when the statistics are that 1 in 4 people will be sexually assaulted, that means you can look to your left, look to your right, look in front and behind you. One of those people has that story. So that's why we need to keep talking about it, and why I'm so happy to be sitting here and doing this with other esteemed professionals.
So one, Lorna, thank you for sharing that. I think there's a power in everyone's journey, as you've heard. Jen, when you look at our panel, it's amazing to me to see Kenneth's journey and finding his aha moment. Laura's journey going from enlisted to an officer. Lorna going from being a victim to competing in a place where it's like, wait a minute, what? Right? It's not just a cliche little podium, or position she took, but the strength to go from a place, again, just looking at mental health. when you look at from a claims perspective, right, some of the symptoms you'll hear, and Laura could definitely go into detail on these things, it's neglect of personal hygiene, the inability to maintain, to create or maintain effective relationships, and so on and so on. And being in a place where the last thing that you are looking at is your physical. And for you, Lorna, to be able to make that journey and be able to stand out there, some might only see a very beautiful picture or a platform, but the process and what it took you to be able to do that, and then to take that platform there, I would argue and assume that there may be many in that organizations and others who would have taken another platform. They may have been survivors, but they're not going to bring attention to themselves. So I just wanted to one, thank you for being with us, but also commend you for your strength and not only going through your journey, but then stepping on stage to be judged, to be criticized, to be looked at, and then taking that platform to give a voice again to the voiceless. And we're seeing it from the veteran's perspective, from a man's perspective, a woman's perspective, a civilian's perspective. Jen, this is something that affects everyone in some shape, fashion, or form. It doesn't respect where you're at, but the common denominators of journeys, you can see different things in there. What are your thoughts as you kind of hear, Jen, a little bit about everyone's journey here, which I'm sure many watching might be able to relate to Lorna, to Laura, to Kenneth. I would add before I give it to Jen that you may be in a place, and I'll just use personal hygiene, which is one of the ones that everybody looks at, right? You're going to file a claim, right, Laura? Don't wash your hair, look, whatever. Just to talk claim for a second, it's not go to a CMP exam or an interview looking a hot mess. It's that you, for example, were a person who took pride in how they looked. That's just what you did. You don't put makeup on to hide. It's just how you face the world. Maybe Kenneth had every sneaker under the sun. Maybe he was immaculate in his dress. He took care of himself, did certain things. And then you experience trauma and you slowly begin to go into reverse. And you're not looking at that. So your appearance and physical and personal hygiene goes out the window. I don't want to face the world. Some might have suicidal tendencies or ideations or thoughts. So the last thing you're thinking about is looking a certain way. So when someone says, for example, one of the symptoms being the neglect of personal hygiene, it doesn't mean they didn't shower that day. It means I haven't seen Kenneth in 5 years. 5 years ago, something happened, and I don't recognize Kenneth anymore because he was someone that had literally 2 outfits for every day, and now he has neglected that. Laura was someone that you couldn't tell nothing to, and when she was in that rut, in that dark place, couldn't even recognize her. Same for Lorna. And to be able to get the strength to push forward and regain that again, I think is powerful, again, to be able to just face the world and just looking at personal hygiene as one thing, because it's something that many veterans and individuals look at, right, Jen? I'm a hermit. I'm not coming out the house. I'm just not caring. I want to end it right now, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it shows different pathways there. What are some of your thoughts, Jen, from a mental health perspective?
I have a lot of thoughts. One of my first thoughts is something I noticed as a therapist is there's value in people having their story heard, like really listened to, and getting to share their story with someone who's actively listening and who's able to validate their experience. And so I certainly think there's value in that and being able to talk about it. But I think there can be some hurdles to being able to do that. And I think a lot of times it can take someone else in our life saying, "Hey, I don't recognize you, dude."
Mm-hmm.
Or I miss you. I miss who you used to be, and to understand that until we resolve our trauma, which it is always the survivor's choice if or when they are ready to do that. That's the most important piece, is it's their choice. But until they do, that trauma is rotting in the fridge, and so it's there, and it keeps us stuck in the past. Our bodies don't know the difference between the past and the present with regards to the trauma. So we go into protection mode, and that's why we see some of those things that you're talking about, because we're just being protective. We're conserving our energy. We're trying to survive. And I think it takes a lot of courage to be able to reach out. And also there can be, I'll tell you something. Let me change directions. survivors are some of the strongest people I've seen.
Hmm.
They've gone through enormous things, enormously painful things. And a lot of them can still find it in themselves to do the work they need to do to heal. And sometimes it's just taking that first step. Maybe tonight you hear something from Laura, from Kenneth, from Lorna, from DP, from myself. Maybe you hear something and you're like, wow, I don't know if I could take that first step. But maybe that first step is smaller than you think. Maybe it's connecting with a loved one and saying, I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but something bad happened to me and that's why I struggle. And I find there can be some peace that comes with that as long as you choose someone to share that with who's safe enough. But I'll tell you, I believe in the resilience of survivors. I have seen enormous strength in people who've had people do really awful things to them.
Jen,
So
I have to ask you,
yeah.
Jen, to that point, like I asked Lorna, if someone wants to reach out to a therapist, how does that even look like? Right? We talked about the fact that it's not
Yeah.
like law and order on the legal side, but if I go see a therapist, do I have to unpack everything? Am I having to take 1,000 pills? How does that, what is the
No.
first day? What is the first step?
Well, that's a great question, DP. So the first thing I'd say is that only psychiatrists and who are medical doctors and other medical doctors can prescribe medication. So a licensed therapist, unless they also are a medical doctor, or I should say like a psychiatric nurse practitioner or someone like that, they are the only ones who can prescribe medication. So a therapist may say, hey, have you ever thought about getting a referral for medication? But one of the things I should say is I haven't seen, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm going to tread lightly, but I haven't seen people have great success with medicating PTSD. Because it's not, the thing about PTSD is the only reason it's considered a disorder is because you're still having a response in the present to something that happened in the past, not because your response is wrong or whatever. So medication is not usually the first thing that comes to my mind as a therapist when someone comes in. So just to quell that. And I guess if any therapist worth their salt, the first appointment is an intake. We want to get to know you. But if you're not comfortable sharing something, any therapist worth their salt, if you're like, yeah, I'm not ready to talk about that, should say something to the extent of, hey, I get it. You know what? If you ever are, let me know.
And I think that's powerful, Jen, for folks. And for if anyone has questions, we're going to start moving into a Q&A section here. There's a lot of questions that are being answered in the chat. I will read them and not pop them up again out of the individual's privacy. But there's a lot of questions about that, to the legal side, to the mental health side, to the claim side. But I would ask that there's a difference, and I want to get both Lorna and Jen's opinion here, but Kenneth and Laura can relate. When we're in service, you went to sick call or you went to the medical professionals, and pretty much what they gave you is what it was. Pretty much you got some Motrin, you got some water, move on, and you're done. And I say that to say that from a military perspective, we don't believe we have rights in service. We just go and we're given what we're given and we move on. In this space today, as a veteran, as someone who's exited service, and even someone in service, there's something I think everyone needs to understand, and I want Lorna and Jen to opine on this as well, but you have rights. And by rights, I mean you have the ability to fire your therapist or legal representative. I'll say that again. You have the right to fire your therapist or legal representative if they are not able to have a relationship with you to undertake the path that you're going to go down. If I don't feel that Lorna and I are in sync to go down this rabbit hole from a legal perspective, I'm not going down that route. I'm not stuck only with that one lawyer. It might not be a good fit. That therapist you might have been seeing because they're close to you or your insurance says it's a preferred one, it might not be the one for you. And you might have to fire them because unlike other specialties, this is not you go in for a checkup and you go out. Your therapist might be a relationship that you will have that will continue for a period of time. that legal relationship with that person representing you, hearing your most intimate thoughts and past events, you have to trust them. From a legal perspective and a therapeutic perspective, you have to trust who you are with. And if that chemistry is not there, you're going to do yourself a disservice because you will not open to them up in therapy, and you will not have a honest conversation on the legal side. And if Lorna does not have, or your legal representative does not have all the facts to be able to see in the law how to help you make your argument, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Is that a fair statement? What are your thoughts, Lorna, on that?
Yes, that is a very fair statement, and I completely agree. One thing that I think is important, an important point to make right at this juncture is if you are going to be pursuing any kind of case against somebody for MST as a result of the overturning of this decision by the Supreme Court, you've got to understand what that looks like. This will be tried under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. This is a crime, a military crime that's going to be tried, and it's going to be prosecuted, hopefully. And as the individual who was the victim of the crime, you're going to be treated more like a witness. You're going to be treated in ways that perhaps you're not ready to be, that you don't anticipate, and that you're not comfortable with. That doesn't mean that the prosecutor or the individual who's acting as the prosecutor doesn't care about you or doesn't have empathy for you or can't sympathize for you. But what it means is in order for them to do their job efficiently and effectively for you, they need certain evidence. They need your cooperation. They need you to be on a certain page of understanding and of accepting of what this process is going to be like and what it's going to subject you to. So again, I go back to my recommendation of always consulting with somebody. There are plenty of attorneys who will give a free consultation to anybody who's considering pursuing a claim for sexual assault. There are many attorneys who are willing to do that, even if this attorney is not going to be representing you in military court. That's what the prosecutor in that sense would be doing. But they will prep you for that, hopefully. And if they can't, that's what talking to a mental health professional is for, is to prep your mind and to prep your soul and to prep you for what that road ahead will look like for you. And it's not always going to be the best decision for somebody to try and pursue a criminal case. And that is very, subjective, and it's very specific to every situation. So I can't opine one way or another who would be better fit to pursue a claim and who wouldn't be. But at least the option is available now for people to pursue these claims for MST. But the process is a harsh reality that you need to be prepared for, because you're no good to yourself if what you're doing is re-victimizing yourself for nothing.
Thank you for that, Lorna. Jen, on the mental health side, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Lorna just said. I think another thing to keep in mind with regards to what she said too is where you are in your treatment process. Not only can you tolerate going through what Lorna is explaining, but also if you've already done some of your treatment, something I'll just mention kind of quickly is if you've had EMDR treatment, for example, you may not have, your memories might be foggy. That sometimes happens with EMDR, which is part of it, is you don't remember the event as well. It's kind of the beauty of it, actually. It doesn't always happen, but also there's not a lot of emotional dysregulation that comes up. So that's another thing that attorney is going to have to take into account if your case is pursuable or not. As far as, if you should fire your therapist, God, I hope you would. Even if it's me, if any of my clients are listening and you're thinking it isn't a fit, please fire me. Let me help you find someone who can work with you better. Because the fact of the matter is, having done trauma work for a long time, people's systems don't let them go there if they don't trust the therapist. I have a sense of maybe I don't think they fully trust me, and I'm hesitant to go through trauma work, but they say they do, and everything seems fine. And we get into trauma work, and their system won't let it won't go. It gets stuck. And that's not always why treatment gets stuck, but I would say that the most important thing about your therapist is that you feel safe enough with that person to go through the pain of what happened, not necessarily sharing the details, but just having someone hold a safe enough space for you. And I guess one of the things I'd really like to point out, and it's my favorite quote by Judith Herman. She's a woman who back in the 90s was already talking about complex PTSD. So, I mean, she's just an amazing woman. And I'll paraphrase because I'll butcher it if I try and directly quote her. But she says that no intervention that takes away the power of choice from a survivor has any hope of helping them heal. And so if I hope to be part of someone's recovery process, if Lorna hopes to be part of someone's recovery process, if Laura, Kenneth, DP, other coaches hope to be part of someone's recovery process, if we take away their power of choice by saying they have to work with us or they have to do this or they better prosecute or they better not, we can have conversations about, hey, here's my opinion, here's what I'm thinking, have you thought about this? But I really want, especially veterans who are used to being told what to do and don't think they have rights, part of your healing is reclaiming the power of choice that you have.
Thank you for that. We're going to move into some questions, but again, I think that the biggest, I used one example before when me and Jen did a live before, and I'll say it again, because when it comes to the mental health aspect, these invisible wounds, right? That's like the term now that you hear a lot of. I would argue and say that it's no different than a visible wound. And what I mean by that is, if Kenneth was hit by a vehicle, he may lose the ability to walk like a regular person, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't regain or find the way to build muscles and abilities and through therapy to walk again. He may have a limp. He may not be able to walk as he used to. He may not be able to run like he used to, but it doesn't limit him from what he's able to do moving forward. On the emotional and psychological side, it's the same thing. When you've experienced trauma, those injuries are there, and therapy arguably is going to help you to regain the tools to walk again. And sometimes I will say, from my point of view, those are things that I've neglected as a retired law enforcement officer, right? The badge, the job, the position, don't want to, show that you're weak. But the fact of the matter is, if you experience an event, an accident, and you're limping, you're fooling no one. I can see you're limping, Kenneth. You need to go get some help. You need to go get that fix. You need that therapy. And it doesn't take away from the fact that you were walking across the street and that vehicle that hit you does not take away from who you are as a person. As a victim that has experienced something like this, to Laura's point, you were just crossing the street. You were just doing your job. You were just doing what you were doing and living your life, and something happened that crossed paths with you and you were never the same. And from a mental health perspective and a disability perspective, that's the argument. Because there are social and occupational impairments where some of the questions that have come up is, it's been so long, I don't even know their name. I don't even have the ability to make an argument. I never said anything, Laura. I never said anything, Kenneth. Lorna, please, that was the 80s. You didn't talk about this stuff. But I would offer to everyone listening that there's something called markers. And on the disability side as well as on the legal side, this begins to paint the picture. Because there was Private Reese, right? Moving on up. Private Laura Page, moving on up. Right? You're enlisted, you're doing your job, everything is fine, and great reviews, and everything is fine. And then the event happens. And all of a sudden, things begin to spiral out of control. And your reports are no longer excellent. Your fitness begins to waver. Things begin to change. And in your life, there are marketable things that you can mark and say, here, in this point, you were on this trajectory, and then it stalled, and then you began to decline. We've worked with veterans who have literally left service and went on to become homeless, drug addicts, dealt with legal incarceration and so forth. And there's markedly something in their life that you can see that in 1987, something happened when they went from a rising shooting star to basically stalling because of what's happening around them. And you may not see this, but it's no different than a child who gets a tummy ache when they don't want to go see someone. And later on, you find out that, oh, wait a second, someone was doing something to said child. And that in turn is why the tummy ache happened. I'll tell you that as a human being, that same thing happens in life. You went from a soldier or an airman or a marine or a sailor who always was there, who was top of their game, and now you're on sick call and you're finding ways to get out of your unit and you're finding ways to kind of get out of something, and all of a sudden everything begins to change. You're just exhibiting those tummy aches in a grown-up fashion, i.e. reasons to get out of the unit, get out of the situation. Your body is in fight or flight, and you'll find ways to be late all the time or what have you. Those are markers. And I offer that because for many individuals, the question is, I never said anything. But there are things in your life where I can say, for example, as someone who went to grade school with Laura, I knew who she was, I knew how she was, but at this point in time, something changed. I was not there with her serving, but I know that the person that came back was not the BFF I had before she left. When Kenneth deployed, we were like this, and he came back a different person. I wasn't there with him, but I know my friend, and I don't recognize him anymore. And that's the reality of markers around someone's life that begin to piece together the truth of what's happened. So I offer that as some anecdotes and points for those out there that don't have maybe the words to put together things that may be happening in their lives, but how Laura and Kenneth, for example, are able to assist and help just from a claims perspective to begin to unpack some of that, which then leads to having to talk to someone like Jen. And because of this decision, talking to someone like Lorna. There's some questions that come up. I'll read them out loud, and it'll be open for whoever wants to kind of jump in. Jay says, I'm currently going through prolonged exposure after 30 years, non-MST. I find it very difficult because it is intensive. I am rated for major depressive disorder at 70%, although the VA mental health team has diagnosed me with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, major depressive disorder, MDD, anxiety, panic attacks with agoraphobia. I feel that the therapist is rushing me to heal faster than I am able to after so long, and my age comes into play. Is the VA trying to get my severity down so they can downgrade my 70% rating? What are your opinions? What is your thoughts on that, Jen and Laura, from the mental health side and the VC side?
So one of the things I'll say about the mental health side, and I need to tread lightly because I don't know this therapist, I don't know the case. And so just from my perspective, what I do know about prolonged exposure, also called PE, is it's very, very intense. Basically, you're just reliving your event over and over with trying to create some safety as you're reliving it. The people who offer that type of therapy are strong proponents of it, the VA being one of them. I am not a supporter of that. The dropout rate is really high because it is so intensive, and we now have other treatments that they're not as intense as that. They're not as traumatizing. Not that EMDR is a walk in the park, but if it's done well and done correctly, it's not as intense as that. It is intense. I'm not gonna, but I believe there's other ways. Now, a trained PE therapist is gonna fight me on that. So I think it's important to note that. But that out of the way, if you in any way feel like your therapist is rushing you, I would say that that's the next conversation you need to have. Like, hey, this is moving too fast for me. I don't feel ready for this. And if they're saying, no, we need to do this, that's taking your way of power of choice. And I can't imagine that would feel healing to you. I don't know your therapist, and I'm sure they're a stand-up human. And I would hope that if you say that, like, wow, this is moving too fast for me, that they would slow down. And I have to say, if I was your therapist and you said to me that we were moving too fast and I didn't slow down, I hope you would stop seeing me. With all due respect.
No, and I think that's fair, Laura. To the point of, are they trying? Because again, there are great therapists. I'll put the caveat. There are great therapists at the VA. There are some that maybe are not a good fit. Same in the civilian world. That said, Laura, what are your thoughts to the latter point there? Where are they trying to push me to make my symptoms better to basically take down my rating? What do you think when you hear that, Laura?
So, and a lot of times the VA providers do have somewhat of a chip on their shoulder, at least in my experience with therapists at the VA. But just because you go through therapy and just because you're getting treatment doesn't mean you're better. It doesn't mean those symptoms don't exist. It doesn't mean that they don't come and go. You have good days and bad days. So as far as your rating goes, I don't think they're purposefully trying to heal you, to take away your rating, because I would never deter anybody from treatment. But again, like Jen said, if it's not a good fit, then I definitely think you should try something else. But I know a lot of us are a little bit apprehensive with the VA because it's like a us against them mentality. But they're not always against you. And I don't think your therapist is trying to heal you to take away your benefits. But I understand some of that mentality, and that comes down to our mental health symptoms sometimes again, where we don't trust the VA because we've gone, round and round again when they tell you you don't have PTSD. Well, now they admit you do have it, and they just can't seem to get it together sometimes. But I understand that. But I don't think that that's the case. And you can always fight that. If you do ever get reevaluated and get reduced, there's ways to fight back with that. Showing your treatment as proof that you still have issues, not that you're magically healed. So there's ways to fight back against that.
And one point I would caveat to, and I'll pass it to you, Kenneth, here, is that at the VA, there's two departments at play here, right? We have the BVA and the VHA, right? We have the Veterans Benefit Administration and the Veterans Health Administration. And I say that because the healthcare and treatment side of the house falls into healthcare. When you are going to pursue a disability, that is another department. So while you are receiving treatment from the VA, that treatment arm does not necessarily affect the other. Now, that does not mean that there may not be proof and records to show that there's a marked improvement, but I would offer to you that when it comes to the mental health gamut, you can have a Monday where you are symptom-free and a Tuesday where you are full-blown at 100 with your symptoms. So the pendulum of how this goes from day to day, it's not one day I had a good day, so all things now are said and done. There has to be a marked continuous improvement over a period of time. And what that means is that even if you're at the VA getting health care or you're getting mental health services, you have to be honest and open with what's going on. Because what you don't want to do is be dishonest with yourself just to be able to get out of that meeting quickly and have them write whatever they want. Because the reality is they have to be able to see what's really happening. But to echo and double down on what Laura said, it doesn't necessarily work like that. Really, it could be a variety of things here for the question as to why you may feel rushed, but the reality is that it just may not be the modality for your therapy that may work, and it doesn't mean it's the only one. It just may be the pace of that therapy, i.e., if you're going to take this therapy, it's about to get hot and heavy because this is kind of going, a little bit faster than other modalities. So maybe exploring other things, and I'll also link Jen's page here shortly, which has many blogs available, including one for this subject with different options available as far as modalities and treatments to be able to share.
So DP, what I will say is the blog that I wrote for this, I linked that about the therapies. I linked that to this current blog article. And so you should be able to find it in today's blog post. That one, it's down. It's one of the hyperlinks in that. And what I would say is,
and just so people know, this is over at www.pathways-to-wellness-llc.com. It's linked as well in the description of this live, but definitely feel free to go forth and check this out because there's good information there for you. You were saying,
thanks, DP. Yeah, so what I was going to say too, it might not even be that prolonged exposure isn't a fit for you. I mean, just because I don't like it as a clinician doesn't mean it doesn't work for some people. But it might mean that you need to build more stabilization skills before you're ready for it. It might mean that you need a whole different modality. It might mean that you don't trust your therapist enough. I'm not sure, but I think it's important to evaluate it for yourself and have that conversation with your therapist. Because if you're not comfortable, then that's a treatment issue that needs to be brought to that therapist, and they should be comfortable with that. I mean, that's something that happens all the time. I love it when people say, hey, Jen, this isn't working for me. I'm like, oh, I had no idea. I thought that was really going well, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that we want you to do if something isn't working.
Thank you. Kenneth, I think you had something.
Yeah, so I actually went through PE therapy as an MST. And I want to first and foremost say to the person that brought up this, you know, I understand where you're coming from. I myself, I had to pull out of it. I had a change in doctors. I had a new doctor come in. We didn't match well, and immediately he was doing kind of like what you're explaining, kind of pushing to kind of push everything, hey, and for the people that, don't really know what PE's like, for me as an MST survivor, I was sitting in a small room with my therapist, and this is a male therapist, which kind of made me uneasy because of my past. And I had to close my eyes, cross my arms, which puts me at the most vulnerable position because I don't feel like I can, reach out and stop something. And I had to relive my incident for an hour and a half at a time. And once you finish your story, you turn around and you relive your story again until that hour and a half session is up. I got to the point where I had to say, enough's enough. I can't do this. And just like we spoke about before, I fired my doctor. I went through a few more doctors at the VA, and they're all pushing, PE, PE, PE. We need to do this. I said, nope, I'm done. And I went out to the civilian world, and I found an awesome doctor that I'm working with now, and it's helped me a lot. It did help me to be able to speak about my situation. I will give it that. But it is a very triggering form of therapy.
And thank you for that, Kenneth, because I think it gives context. I'm going to move through some questions. One that came in was, what does this mean for stalled MST claims? From the VA perspective, right? Claims are still going as they're going, but this president really opens up now also the criminal side of the house, the legal side of the house, to be able to seek actions there. So from a regular disability perspective, on the VA claim side of the house, those claims can be pushed forward, which then segues into another question that came up of what happens if you've never said anything. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll just repeat and say that there's different ways someone can compact that, and that's where having a conversation with someone like Laura Kenneth comes into place from the VA claim side of the house, or a coach like we have here at VA Claims Insider, or any other, let's say, VSO professional you may choose to reach out to. But what we do here is to look at kind of where you're at. For some individuals, they may have never reported anything, and it's markers and the proof that they may be able to have of what's happened in their life, their own sworn statements. Some may not have police reports. Some people never reported anything, but that doesn't stop you from being able to file a claim, because we've worked with veterans who didn't file a police report, but they did have evidence to begin to build around of what happened. Ken, if I see you kind of nodding your head, and Laura, I'll go to you first. A quick, point on that, as far as those that may say they didn't report anything and have anything. So you kind of smile a little bit. What are you thinking?
Oh, I was pointing at Kenneth. He said it was unreported, and a lot of people's go unreported, and that's very common. And they say 1 in 4, but the numbers are higher with veterans and service. I don't know exactly what the numbers are on the top of my head, or I would quote them, but a majority of those still are unreported. And it doesn't mean you still can't go forward with the claim. Like DP said earlier, there's markers, there's things that PT scores going down, getting an Article 15, getting in trouble for underage drinking because you're self-medicating, or whatever, the case is. There are ways to link it back to your service. And as a veteran coach, what we do is help you kind of unpack that baggage a little bit, help you write your personal statement and get through that process to share your story one last time, hopefully, that you can get through this claim process. If you don't want to go to therapy, you don't have to. If you don't want to seek legal, you don't have to. You don't have to seek claim, compensation either. But as somebody who's gone to therapy and gone the claim route, I can tell you it was worth it to me. And everybody's path is different, but I think it's still worth pursuing, even if you don't have evidence, because we've got proof right here that you can still win your claim.
Anything on?
Yeah, so I'm just like you said, I'm a perfect example of it. I didn't report anything. I sat down and I wrote a letter, a personal statement. Now, granted, that personal statement took me 3 months to do. It took me 3 months to write a paper. The reason for that is because the way I wrote it. I took it to the rawest form of what happened to me and spelled it out verbatim. I did not use, fancy, get around the words, I said what happened. I said what I was forced to do, and that's what you have to do, because you have to grab that raider, that person, through that paper and make them understand, because they're not talking to you face to face. They can't see your emotions. They can't see you start shaking, you bouncing your leg. Like on the first couple lives I did, people would comment in the comments, "Hey, Kenneth, quit bouncing your leg. It looks like Godzilla's coming to get you." But that's a trigger, right? That's showing where I'm at. But with that paper that I wrote, that statement, I grabbed the rater and I got my rating first time around. I only filed once, but you have to be willing to take that step and become vulnerable for that time. Now, granted, it could take you 3 months, it could take you a year, but do it. Because at the end of the day, just that letter that came back from the VA and said, "We accept the fact this happened to you." And Lori, you can tell me, you can agree with me or not, but that is the most vindicating letter that you will ever receive.
And I popped this up because this is basically what kind of is answering. So we kind of have been unpacking it, but it's really about the question that kind of came forward is, what about those that have not come forward, dealing with fear of reprisal, struggling with their story being out there, not wanting people to know, all the feelings of shame and guilt and fear of not being believed or denied. Because to Kenneth's point, right, and I kind of offer this now, is there's something that happens, right, on any claim. Just speaking from a VA claim perspective, from a claims perspective, it's not here anymore, right? It's real, right? There's a vindication that comes when it's like, no, Kenneth experienced these events, and now it's been vindicated to a degree to say that he's not just making this thing up. It's not just something that lived in here. Now he has a rating, right? I wear a shirt that says U.S. Army Disabled Veteran, not because I want the world to know that, but it's to be able to put words to action that the things that we have experienced are real. And sometimes when we work with someone, Laura, how many veterans would you say, can you even count, have had a breakdown? Not because they won, not because they got a magical number. It's that finally, after 20 damn years, 10 damn years, 30 years, this thing that basically stole from me, I would offer to you all, there is a Vietnam veteran out there. There's a Cold War veteran out there. There is a veteran that served many, many ages ago. And part of the claim disability aspect is you have been robbed of a reality of your life and those around you. Laura now, for example, is 70 years old. And the reality is that if Laura is Aunt Laura to me or Grandma Laura, I don't know that Laura back in the day used to cut it up with Jen and she was a dancer. I never experienced that. I was robbed of the fact of who she was before said event. And there are veterans out there today who are living shells of themselves. And the goodness and the beauty that you were, your your children, your nephews, and others have been deprived and robbed of that. And that's part of this vindication of being rated to be able to reclaim that back, to find the tools through therapy and finding legal recourse that you could begin to move forward. You got hit by the vehicle, but you're limping, but you're walking, but you can regain again the strength to do that. And the reality is that you can begin to show your nephews and others in those strained relationships things they never knew because you were so busy battling and suppressing things. And the sad part is, we use the fridge analogy, you didn't only put trauma in there, you put yourself in there. And now what you have is a shell. I'll say it again. You put yourself in that fridge. You took the camouflage off. You took the uniform off. But emotionally, you're still camouflaged. Every Monday, how many times, Laura? How many times, Kenneth? How was the weekend? Not long enough. Same old, same old. No pride in the background. There was a time where what's behind Laura may have not been there at her place of work because there was nothing personal she wanted to share. But to get to a point of regaining that and being able to show your truth of who I am and sharing something, because we've all known that, right? We don't say anything. We have canned responses. Kenneth, what you do yesterday? The usual. Laura, what's going on with you? You know how it goes. You've said nothing. But the other person who has not dealt with what you've dealt with, you ask them, they'll give you an hour-long story about what happened at Walmart. You, on the other hand, literally went into a road rage, almost beat someone, had to call Lorna to bail you out of jail and come help you because you got into a situation. And guess what? Your response is, just the usual. Who are you lying to? That's the reality that I want to focus on here to the question, which is part of this process. It's more than just you. Kenneth said, I was losing my family. It doesn't matter if you have never filed. It doesn't matter if you filed and got denied. It only stops if you stop. And the benefit of working with someone like Laura or someone like Kenneth or someone like Lorna and someone like Jen is that you don't do it alone. There's this constant thought that in some shape, fashion, or form, if you are dealing with something, you have to go ahead and pack it away and not say anything. And the reality is that professional athletes have coaches. Lorna, did you have a coach when you were competing, right? You have a coach to help you, right?
Yes.
You have a coach, Jen. Being a coach, being a therapist, you have a therapist, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's this thought that we have. There's a thought that we have that, we don't need help. We could do it all by ourselves, but yet we pay top dollar to a my service dog is having fun here. We pay top dollar, to see athletes perform, but they have coaches. So the reality is, you as a veteran lose nothing by having a coach, by having a therapist. It's the way the world works. If you want to go into the pro leagues, you have a coach to help you do X, Y, Z. When it comes to this, from a mental health aspect, if you would have a coach to help you wrestle or compete, why wouldn't you get a coach to help you live? I'll say it again. If you would get a coach to help you compete at the Miss America pageant, or to help you train for a triathlon, or to help you play football, why wouldn't you get a coach to help you get the tools to regain your life and begin to live? That's what this is about. When we're talking about a rating, legal remedy, or getting therapy, it's about regaining the tools to walk again. You were hit with something that left you different than what you were. But the story doesn't stop there. But it doesn't have to happen alone. That's obviously way more than the question kind of asked, but I definitely wanted to share that. Jen, what do you got on that?
Well, I have a thought about that, and then I actually have a question for Lorna. My thought is, there is no manual on how to live life after crappy things happen to you. That's why you walk the journey with a therapist. I mean, that's not something we learn in kindergarten, or 10th or 12th grade. I mean, it's something that we have to all navigate, but people like me, for example, have walked that journey with others, or maybe even ourselves. And so that's why you ask someone, is because it's not something you would know just being born, you know. But the question I actually have for Lorna, you know, you talked about what if someone, because I have a client in this situation. So what if someone didn't report at the time of the incident? What if they didn't report to the police that this happened to them? You know, Lorna, is that something they can even take? I mean, what do you do with that? Like, oh, do I even bother talking to an attorney? I mean, is it even worth it?
Well, the answer to the question of whether or not it's worth it is, it depends. It may be that step of just consulting with a private attorney, telling that story to somebody that's outside of their inner circle, outside of their community, somebody who to them represents taking an authoritative step into getting control back over this incident that's happened. Just that conversation, even if it goes nowhere, might be extremely worth it. And if you're in a situation where an incident of MST happened to you, you didn't report at the time, years and years have passed, and now you're ready to report, okay, good. That's excellent. You've reached a different step in your life. Again, it's being realistic about what that's going to look like for you. Did you tell anybody at the time that it happened? Did you write it in a diary? Did you tell a friend? Did you tell a family member? Is there any kind of evidence or proof, that's with the other party, with the perpetrator of this crime, that may weigh in your favor, may be available to you? Those are all things to consider. When pursuing a crime, a criminal case, the prosecutor can't do that without a certain amount of evidence that establishes that something criminal actually happened. And that alone is why having these conversations is so difficult, because if an attorney or a prosecutor looks you in the eye after hearing you spill your soul to them and says, well, that's awfully sorry, I'm sorry to hear that, but we really can't help you, that's certainly not going to do anybody any good. But it might do somebody some good. They might just really want to have that conversation. They might want to be at the place where they can have that conversation, even if they know it's not going anywhere. So it's hard to say one way or another, because every situation is different. But if you're somebody who never reported, think about if you ever told anyone, if you ever wrote it down, if there's any shred of evidence that may be out there that could help you bring a claim against the person who did this to you while you were serving in the military. That's something to consider, of whether or not you want to do that, you're ready to do that, and you're prepared to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, and
that's a great question.
just because an attorney says you don't have a pursuable case doesn't mean that it invalidates what happened to you. It just means that avenue of recovery isn't open.
Absolutely. Right? Yes, there's no indictment on you or your experience or what you've been through for an attorney or a legal professional to tell you that there isn't a pursuable claim. It does nothing. It speaks nothing to that. It's just telling you that one avenue of recovery or remedy may be closed off to you, but that has nothing to do with what you've actually been through and the severity of it. No other crime on earth is prosecuted or pursued quite the way that sexual assault and violence in general is, but sexual assault especially. This is an extremely unique type of crime that it does not get pursued the way that it should, for the sake of the victims who experience that.
Thank you, Lorna. There's one comment that I want to read out because we've touched on it, but the faces of those that are going through this. Jay says, I am a victim and I am a teacher. I only wash my hair every 5 days. I cannot bring myself to wear makeup. I don't leave the house when I don't work. I am still waiting to hear back from the claim I've submitted. It took me 21 years to report this. There are individuals you see teaching classes driving school buses. You see them in life and they're dealing with these things. And I would offer that in the climate that we live in, with what's happening with this pandemic, regardless of where you sit or your affiliations may be, people are hurting. People are dealing with things. Social distancing right now is what must happen because of the pandemic. However, there is still something going on, which is social distancing from an emotional standpoint. As veterans, we like to recluse. And literally, when people ask someone like me or Lorna or Kenneth, how are you dealing with the pandemic? It's like, please, I was born in the darkness. This is home to me. What's that? I don't have to leave and interact with people. You're speaking my language. This is great. I don't have to go to malls and I don't have to be around people, no stadiums. I don't have to make excuses for not wanting to go places. This is a dream for people like us. But however, this compounds what's happening because there is a healing when Kenneth calls and says, hey, let's go out and do this. Let's go to Top Golf. When Laura says, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, let's meet up and have lunch. There's something that happens when we interact with others. We're social beings, regardless of what we've been through. But we just don't have the tools maybe to do that. But the reality is that during what's happening now, reach out and check on your strong friends, because I'll tell you that it is the individuals that sometimes you would never expect that are dealing with things. It's that teacher. It's that police officer. It's that school bus driver. It's a person you least expect. It's that Miss America contestant, for crying out loud. It's that therapist, that lawyer. It's that fill in the blank who is dealing with something, because we've all seen what happens. We cannot deny the statistic. We kept the number here for a reason. But the fact of the matter is, we lose so many veterans a day. Because the fact of the matter is, for those of us that have lost someone close to us, it's always the same reaction of, I just talked to them yesterday. Everything was fine. I can tell you that at the darkest moments that I've been in, or Kenneth's been in, and Laura's been in, trust me, you would not see it coming. Because it's one of those things where you just pack it away, and it's literally, yes, we had lunch on a Monday, and then Tuesday, it happens. And that's the reality. So you have to check on your strong friends, because some folks are so far deep into that darkness that they will not reach out or cry out for help. They're beyond that. They are dead fast on a journey and a path to take away the pain. And that pain that we have felt of being in that darkness, what we want to do is kind of just sit with you right now in that darkness and let you know that we'll just sit here with you. And the good thing about people like Kenneth and people like Laura, people like Lorna, people like Jen, it's that they understand that darkness, and they understand how they got out of that darkness. It doesn't make them better than you. Laura's not better than me. I'm not better than Kenneth. But they figured a way out of that maze, right? It's like we're all in a cornfield. We don't know how to get out. And emotionally, the lights are off and you don't know which way to go. And you keep hitting the wall and you don't find a way out. And what Laura's doing, what Kenneth is doing, is saying, hold my hand. And if you want to sit here, we'll sit here. But I know the way out. In the military, we say this in the Army, in different brigades and regiments and so forth, right? Rangers lead the way, follow me. Lead the way. We lead from the front. And there's a reason we lead from the front, because when Laura took that pledge to go from enlisted to an officer, she said, I will lead. And by leading means that I'm going to show them the way. I'm going to provide that leadership. In this space, in this mental health, in this journey, what's happening with military sexual trauma, it's something that's so underreported that many just don't even know where to start. So when someone like Kenneth or Laura speak up and Lorna shares her story, what they're saying is they were able to get out of that darkness, out of that maze, out of that foxhole, out of that spiraling pit of pain, and they will sit with you. To Jen's point, having that confidence that they're not going to try to rush you through your process, but they're going to sit with you and say, when you're ready, it's this way. And sometimes your path might be a little bit different than mine, but rest assured, the tools that you can pick up by talking to someone like Laura, like Lorna, like Kenneth or Jen, is that you have the ability to find your way. And sometimes those tools that you'll gain from Laura and Jen, it's a flashlight, it's a map, it's tools, because there's many exits. So it doesn't matter where you're at right now, but I wanted to just share that there is a way forward. And you may not have a reason to take that, but I'll tell you, there's someone behind you that you would not want to let down. And sometimes, maybe for Laura, it was knowing that she would not let another woman, man, feel left alone. So she stepped up to lead. And that gave her some strength to be able to reach back. And maybe for you right now, it might not be losing your family because you may have lost it, but there's someone out there who you have to help. I would offer to you in closing that sometimes what's missing in our society as warriors is we don't tell the story. In our society, we don't pass the baton. We don't have this rite of passage. We don't have a warrior that says, hey, I've been there. And what Laura and Kenneth are doing as veterans is passing the torch to others to say, I went through this, but you don't have to go through this alone. You don't have to take forever to get there. And for you listening now, maybe it's that bond and that selflessness of helping another veteran that might be the spark for you to get that. Because in your mind, you're still Sergeant fill in the blank. You're still Captain so and so. And on the veteran side, there's someone who your voice can help. And if that's enough to give you the ability to say, I'm going to reach back and not let someone deal with my pain, it's like a comedian, right? They're good at what they do because they don't want to have someone feel that pain again. So for others, I would say that's the same thing that's happening to a degree. You want to pay it forward. You don't want them to feel that pain. So whatever the spark is, whatever helps you to just call Jen or call your therapist or call Lorna, whoever it might be, reach out to Kenneth, reach out to Laura. Whatever the reason might be, hold on to that. Even if it's for your dog, or if it's for your spouse, or it's for someone you know down at the VFW who you know for a fact needs help, go get the help to help them. But the point is, let's just try to do something. That's something that I would share because I think it goes unsaid, and it doesn't matter where you're at or what your journey is. We're going to wrap up here in about 5 minutes. I'm going to ask everyone here with us to have one point or a nugget to say to someone who may be in their position, and we'll go through some questions. So I'll start with you, Jen. For someone listening right now, what would you offer to them as an advice who may say it's not even worth it?
Well, I would say you have a choice. I get that you might feel like it's not worth it, and I would say that you have a choice. And I think you've heard from people who have walked this path before you. It can be worth it, but also it's important not to take away your power. Truly, if you're not ready, you're not ready. But one of the most courageous, I think a lot of times the military, we're afraid of looking weak. But I truly believe one of the most courageous things we do as humans is share our vulnerability with another human. I really think that's true. And hopefully we're choosing someone who's earned the right to hear our story, in the words of Brene Brown. And so I guess what I would say is if you're not ready, maybe see what support you need in your life, whether that's, it doesn't have to be to go to therapy, but to get some kind of support so that you're not suffering needlessly. Yeah.
Thank you for that. A little shout out here for you, Laura. I'll give it to you, but Jill wants to say go Laura real quick. So a little shout out for you there, Laura. What would be what would you say to someone out there listening to you right now?
Kind of to Jen's point, veterans, we do have a tendency to minimize what's going on with us or to subdue it or completely suppress it because we are trained to suck it up and not talk about our problems, and we don't want to be seen as weak. But I can tell you, I have gained power through my journey, and seeking, treatment or justice or compensation is, to me, it's important to acknowledge it. And that is, step one. And you may not be in your point in your journey to do that yet, but there are options, and it may not be worth it to somebody to get compensation, or maybe they have dealt with it and they're fine. So we just want you to know that there's options. We want to know that there's been good news, that maybe there is a shift, happening right now. And I think, MST in general is becoming more known about, and people are finally hearing about it. And that's why I'm excited to be part of a panel like this, so we can get the word out that there's options and it's getting better. And I think the culture is shifting, so it's not as taboo to talk about. And I think that's huge. And that's why I was really excited to be part of tonight.
And I want to definitely share for those that would like to reach out. Laura also has a page, so definitely feel free to find her on YouTube as well as the veteran coach. She's on YouTube and Facebook. Laura, any other ways that they can reach out to you, just for those that may be out there?
VAbenefitsexpert.com is also my website. If you guys are interested in working with a veteran coach, or if you just want to talk, we'll be your battle buddy. We'll be your advocate. Even if you don't want to pursue anything, it's completely free to talk. And I'll be your battle buddy. If you just need to tell somebody, we're here for you. So just reach
And
out.
and wherever you're watching this video, if you put a comment, there's many questions that have been asked. We have coaches actually in the comments answering things. Feel free to message us, right? Again, this is a topic that we know is not going to garner too much conversation because of the nature of what it is. But if you comment or reach out to us, please know that we will reach out to you. If you want us to relay something to Laura or to Lorna or to Jen or to Kenneth, we'll make sure we do that wherever you are seeing this. So definitely know that this is a topic that we will continue to speak about, because as you can see, it's a lot to touch on, but it really goes down to you, the person, finding the tools that you need. Lorna, from your side, what would you tell to someone who's listening to you right now, wherever they may be? What would you say to them?
I want to say that for anybody who is sitting there and questioning whether or not it's worth it, whether or not it is worth it depends on what it is and what it means to you. The biggest thing for me in my path from a victim to a survivor was finding ways that I could take back control over what had happened to me. That began when I was 11, when I decided I was going to be a guardian ad litem for abused and neglected children. That was my way of saying, I'm going to take control over what's happening to me by helping other people in similar situations. As life went on, I chose to bring that issue to the Miss America organization because putting myself on stage, putting myself out there for judgment was my way of taking control and guiding that conversation in the way that I knew it needed to go for other people. So whether or not pursuing any legal action seems worth it, it's okay if it does or if it doesn't. Something is worth it to you. Find one way to take control, whether that's when you have a fleeting thought of guilt or shame or this is my fault. If you can find it within yourself, draw your inner voice to say, no, it's not. That's one step of taking control back for yourself. And that is worth it. It's hard work to do, but that type of work is just as worth it and just as important as seeking, legal justice or criminal justice. So we've all got something that's worth it to us. So you just have to find out what it is and harness that and work on one step at a time, building that up until you feel that you're in a much better place to maybe take a different or a bigger step.
Thank you for that. And I'm pulling up some comments here from individuals that have shared the sentiments. Again, we appreciate wherever you may be watching this or listening to this. Again, this may be something to pass to a friend or colleague or someone. This is what it's about. Kenneth, what would you say to someone out there who is listening right now, wherever they may be?
Really, the biggest thing is like we've said, this is a choice, and really it's your choice to come forward and to step into the healing process. I'll tell you, it's that first step is like leaping off, the highest mountain in the world, you know. But once you get there, after you've taken that leap of faith, you spread your wings and you fly. And I'm not going to say it gets super easy. I'm not going to say that we don't all experience things, on a daily basis. But to be able to talk about what's happened, it's like you've grown your wings and you're flying to the highest heights. So just take it on yourself, and really take a deep look inside yourself and see where you want to be.
Thank you for that, Kenneth. In closing, I would say, I echo all the panels that we have here, and I would say that when it's all said and done, today we unpacked and talked about a Supreme Court ruling, and the statute of limitations has been removed for many victims, and we wanted to do justice by individuals who may have packed things away by at least talking and humanizing the experiences of many and highlighting and showing that there are different ways and different faces to resiliency. But I would also offer to you all that the statute of limitation goes beyond just the legal aspect. There is no time limit on speaking up and standing up. There's no time limit on when you can go forth and begin to get help. It may have taken 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. There is no time limit to the trauma. Unlike other wounds, this is not a sprained ankle that heals over time. This is not a broken leg that will cement itself and get better in some shape, fashion, or form. Those injuries that you have emotionally, psychologically remain. And just because you worked around it and avoid things, that doesn't mean it's not there. Hence the word triggers, things that basically presses on that. So I would say to you that reach out to someone. In the military, we're really good about rivalry. Go Army, beat Navy. What was your job? I did this. Laura thought she was bad. Kenneth said he was bigger and badder. It's all fun and games, and it's how we win wars as the military. But I would offer to people listening to this right now that we've put away our uniform and we have to put away our ego. It doesn't matter what your job was. It doesn't matter what you did. It doesn't matter if your trauma or your event or your situation took place in a combat zone or it happened in an apartment complex off base stateside or off duty. At the end of the day, it doesn't make one person's experience worse than the other. So I say that to say that there is power and truth in wherever you may be to begin to take a step forward. And I hope that this conversation begins at least a process for many to begin to ask the question, to reach out to a mental health provider, to begin to look out to what may be some options for legal remedy, but there is no time limit to begin the process. No matter where you're at, whether you've been denied or discredited, you're not alone. I am surrounded with strong individuals here who would never accept that term, but this is what the reality looks like, right? We are our brothers and our sisters keepers, and that's why today we wanted to come together and have this conversation, because beyond the ruling, it's about the self-worth of you as a person being able to try to take it one day at a time. Reach out to any of us, reach out to someone. The point is, keep moving, because at the end of the day, there's no time limit on getting the help that you need. Because at the end of the day, all the ego aside, your trauma is not as bad as mine, and mine is not as bad as yours. We're just trying to together take care of each other to get the help that we need, whether that be from a mental health perspective, a VA claims perspective, or a legal perspective, as we see with this ruling. So it's a conversation that we'll have to come back to again, obviously, because we couldn't get to all the questions, but thankfully we have our coaches answering questions below. So I want to say thank you for spending this time with us. Share it with someone who may use this. Again, we left the number up because if this is triggering or opens up things for you all during this holiday season, you're not alone. Reach out to someone. That's why we have our community. So thank you all for being here. From me, I would say thank you for your time. You could have been anywhere in the world and been doing anything, but you chose to tune in and watch us here. So we look forward to coming back. So from me, I'll say thank you all. I'll let everyone kind of say goodbye, and we'll close out. Jen?
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you can find a safe space for yourself if you're feeling any kind of distress, and that you find the wherewithal to reach out for support.
Lorna?
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I know how difficult this is for a lot of people to talk about, to listen to, but like I said, you've got to find something that is worth it, right? And this was worth it to you to show up and participate and listen to us and engage in conversation with us. And that is a huge step for a lot of you, for a lot of us, I should say. So thank you for trusting us with your time this evening and sharing your experiences with us in this way. And of course, happy holidays to everybody.
Kenneth?
I just wanted to say, if this has touched you in any way, really take that step. I know, like I've said, I'm like a broken record. It's a hard step, but please take that step. do it for yourself. But thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope that maybe we've said something that's really touched you, and open that door just a crack, but maybe we can get you going in the right path. But thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Laura? Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Okay, my bad. I have my baby in the background, so I just want to make sure I was muted when I wasn't talking. But thank you guys for watching, and thank you to DP for allowing me to be part of the panel. It's big news. It's good stuff. So I'm glad that you guys tuned in, and hopefully you got some good information out of this session with us tonight. So
Awesome. Alrighty. So as we kind of close out, wherever you're watching this, make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, reach out to us. We'll get some information out to all of you. So thank you for being with us. Happy holidays. Check on your strong friends. Look out for each other.